Welcome to Cascadia Daily News. We're here in the Cascadia Daily News newsroom in downtown Bellingham today with Hannah Ordos, candidate for Whatcom County Council at Large seat. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Dean Wright. I'll be moderating this discussion. With me are Cascadia Daily News Executive Editor Ron Judd and publisher Cynthia Pope, who comprise the newspaper's editorial board. Also with us is Cascadia Daily News reporter Ralph Schwartz, who covers the campaign and local government. I'd like to thank our partners at nonprofit community radio station KMRE who make this video possible. You can find them at 88.3 on the FM dial or streaming at kmre.org. In covering this election, Cascadia Daily News is using the Citizens Agenda approach, in which readers have been asked to identify the issues they want candidates to talk about. Ron, can you talk briefly about the Citizens Agenda approach and the process the newspaper will use to make endorsements?
Sure, and I like the word approach because it is an approach more than a strict set of rules, and the approach is that the goal of the approach, and it's been used in various news publications over the last decade or so across North America, is to shift the focus away from what became all too traditional horse-race style coverage of campaigns where handlers and other people, and this is more at a national level, but even at the local level, put out issues that they wanted their candidates to be talking about instead of things that readers and voters wanted to be talking about. So we've taken it upon ourselves to invite our readers, who are also voters, to submit questions to us in a process that started several months ago. We got hundreds of questions from readers. We put those into our print newspaper and on our online paper at cascadiadaily.com, and people voted for their top 5 for us to put back on the table in front of candidates like yourself. And they are a portion of it's what guides our election coverage more than constitutes our election coverage. We think these questions are all important because they came directly from readers. So we try to present them to candidates directly like yourself, and those come back to us in answers that'll be printed in our printed voter's guide in October. But we also use them as sort of some coverage subjects for our reporters to ask during their regular separate news coverage of the campaign. And it's been successful for 2 years now. Readers seem to enjoy being asked what they want to know about and what they want to ask us to ask you about, and so that's how it works. We take the answers to these questions and use them as part of the basis for our decision on whom to endorse in races, and so they've been very helpful for us and as material for stories that we're reporting about the election. So whatever is said in these interviews is on the record. We're not writing about this interview specifically, but if you say something newsworthy, we will report it. So thank you for being here.
Okay, let's go first through the Citizens Agenda questions. And I'll say that I have yet to meet a candidate who thinks 150 words is enough to say what they really feel about an issue. So you'll have a chance to expand on some answers here. And I'll also have some specific things to ask you about that. The first question was had to do with the causes of Bellingham's homelessness crisis. Actually, it's all Whatcom County's homelessness crisis, and the metrics in mind for success. Looking at your answer, you said that what you would like to see is continuing to support the programs that are producing positive outcomes while potentially consolidating programs that aren't meeting their intended goals. Which programs do you think have worked and which ones haven't worked?
As directly related to homelessness. Well, first I would just want to say thank you for inviting me to this forum. I appreciate it. I've been on TV only a few times, so here we go. The one I think that comes to mind the most for me, I think the one that's probably long established in Whatcom County is Lighthouse Mission. And it's probably the one I just know more about just because of whom I interact with and what gets publication. I think that their approach has served our community well. I don't think it's big enough or enough and serves everyone. So I think that there's always room to bring other people to the table whose focus is homelessness.
And what hasn't worked?
I don't know if I could say a specific program hasn't worked, but from my perspective, we've dedicated a lot of resources at a state level, at a local level, and it doesn't seem like our problem is getting better. I feel like homelessness, as far as, we did a recent point in time study that was over 1,000, and the last one that I recall, and it was prior to the pandemic, we were at like 700. Don't quote me exactly on the number, but it's significantly more. But I feel like we've been trying to do a lot more to help this situation with not a lot of, I guess the cost that we've invested in it doesn't appear to have resulted in a better outcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Where should that money be spent to get a better outcome?
Oh goodness. I think when we talk about homelessness, and I listen to other people in their discussions, is that it's not a singular approach problem. I think if there was one thing or one small collection of things that could help it, there's people out there that are really smart. We would have figured this out already, but we're still grappling with it. Homelessness has a variety of categories that need to be handled differently. We have our families who are one paycheck away, or that one paycheck is gone. They've experienced a crisis in their life, and they find themselves out of a home or close to being out of the home, and they need support services to stabilize that. I know that the Whatcom Housing Authority and Opportunity Council has programs in place to help that segment of our population. But I think when we get in, and I think this is what people think about when they think about homelessness. They think of Walmart encampments or the Home Depot encampment. What do they need? It's different, and it's even different within those communities. We need behavioral health services for those individuals. We need outreach services to get to them, to offer them services more than what we have right now as far as capacity, and we need substance abuse services. I'm speaking as a private individual, but I am on the board of the North Sound Behavioral Health Advisory, and one of the things our former executive stated to us is that this is the first time in his career in a while where this isn't a fight for funding. We have the funding there. What it is infrastructure and the people to actually perform the services. So I feel like it's this culmination of things that need to come together where we can see improvement. What I was talking about, and this is more anecdotally, not specifically, because of course, in looking at this, I'd want to dig deep into the details of what programs they have, the collection, because I'm sure there's ones in there that I haven't heard of, are smaller grassroots programs. But some of these areas, I think, is there redundancy within these groups? So when I say consolidation, I think maybe consolidation of redundancy, because if we can do a better job of partnering those groups together to eliminate redundancy and streamline, then we still have the capacity within those groups to expand in the areas that we need it. So I think for me that's more just from a general perspective. When we have redundancy, if we can streamline it, then we can increase capacity without actually having to think about increasing dollars.
It sounds like you're seeing a big role there for nonprofits, faith-based groups. Is that right?
Not just. I mean, I think when I hear from people who particularly don't think the Lighthouse mission provides all the things that everybody needs. I think that leaves room to be able to service other people in different ways. And I think that's important. I think all those things need to be explored. I think if we get too narrowed into one path and say this is the only thing that's going to work for this group of individuals, I think that's when we stop being outcome and resolution based and more about sort of wanting to only support the things that maybe our own personal beliefs say is the right way to do things.
Okay.
I hope that made sense.
Let's move on to water. Lake Whatcom Reservoir, as Citizens Agenda question says, continues to be abused. Construction, sewage, traffic, motorboats, jet skis, fertilizers. They asked about the top 3 actions that you would take to significantly decrease the human impact on the quality of Bellingham's drinking water supply. Looking at a specific here, and this is an issue that's come up with other candidates, and it's been an issue in the area for a while. Would you support acquiring more land in the Lake Whatcom watershed to mitigate the impacts of pollution?
I think I would need more information to be able to answer that in the appropriate way. When I was looking at this question and I pulled up the water management plan, one of the things, at least within the role of county council, I wouldn't want to recreate the wheel on something that's already out there and potentially working. And so if I would look to see if that's part of the plan. And if that's part of the plan, I don't know if I'd want to go in and change it. I would want to look at what the data produces to see if that's the direction to go in order to support what we're trying to look for, or what our outcomes are supposed to be. Mm-hmm. I think we do that a lot. I think we try to go in and recreate the wheel, and so I'd want to look deeply into that and ask questions and get a better conversation going before I would say that's the answer.
What do you think are the most important things we can do to deal with water quality like Whatcom?
I think that's a good question. And I think that water quality is important. And when I was looking through that, I think that making sure that we're testing appropriately, making sure that we're listening to the experts on the things that need to be done. I don't know specifically what I would do, but I would look back to what we have in place, and I would support those things that are working.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's move on to an issue that really struck a chord with our readers, and it was Peace Health. There's two questions here. We'll just sort of put them together here. There's the idea that Peace Health has cut some services, some of which have been restored, and what you would do to ensure that Peace Health is living up to its role as a tax-exempt entity to contribute to the community. There's only one hospital in the county. So, I guess first question there is, what can county council do? You noted that you wanted to focus on what county council can actually do as opposed to actually say. Mm-hmm. What can county council actually do? Well,
and I've talked about this a lot in just my candidacy, is the importance of collaboration. And I don't think it's beyond the purview of the council and the executive office to make sure that there's communications with the board at Peace Health. I look at I read about the situation about the palliative care. I don't think any of us have not been affected by someone with cancer or grave illness that would be in need of outpatient services. And so I think losing that obviously caused an outcry of the community enough where some changes were made. I think a different route that could have been taken in a preventative is that if we had a good working relationship with the board members for Peace Health, could we have had those conversations up front in representing the needs of our community so that perhaps we wouldn't have had to go through the steps of them actually eliminating it. And so I think maybe a working relationship maybe could have prevented that decision from being made in the first place.
Do you think that good relationship does not exist now?
I think relationships can always get better, and I think if it was a good relationship, then we may have had a different outcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. And the other part of the question was Peace Health, again, it's the only hospital in town, mm-hmm. The only hospital in the county. There's been some discussion about whether a public hospital district would be useful here. One of the things you said is, maybe we can find ways to bring other providers into the county. Would a public hospital district be one way to look at that? Would you support a public hospital district? And what other ways would you work to bring other providers of healthcare into the county?
Well, health in general is a big part of my life. If you've done any looking into my background, I've taught fitness. I'm certified as a health coach, and so health and wellness is something important, as well as situations within my family where being an advocate for health care is also very important. So for me, I've always been a proponent of being a community that would be friendly to other alternatives for healthcare too, not just within the hospital realm. I mean, if I needed ER attention or I had a broken bone, I mean, I'd want to be able to go to Peace Health and have surgeries and things like that. But I also think there's services that Peace Health can't provide or probably shouldn't provide. The one stop fits all it's not always a good model, and it doesn't inspire competition or just the desire to perform at a level of service that a community needs. And so when you look at things like naturopathic or alternative type of health or acupuncture or other ways that people can seek preventative or even relief from chronic type of illnesses, you always want a community that makes that a friendly place to have those. And I've heard people talk about creating a health district, and I think if the community wants that, that's something that would have to go on a ballot. There would have to be taxes associated with that, and ultimately the community would decide.
What would your advice to the community be if you were saying, do we need this or do we not need it?
I think I would let the community decide that. I think that's one thing as a county council, especially an at-large position, is you're representative. You're supposed to be representative of all voices.
Mm-hmm. The whole county. Mm-hmm.
So I would want to hear who supports it and why, and who doesn't support it and why, and that would help shape how I would represent the constituents. Because ultimately, my own personal opinion about something shouldn't be what motivates me to make a certain decision.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Well, the final Susan's agenda question was, and it's probably the hardest one, how should we create more affordable housing in Whatcom County? And in your answer, you talk about having more efficient permitting, zoning practices. But it has always struck me that one of the larger issues here is that in affordability is that here in this area we have housing prices that are more like what you would see in a metropolitan area like Seattle. But we don't have an economy like a metropolitan area like Seattle has to support the kind of jobs that people need to pay for those houses. So what can we do that will make a real difference in affordability?
I have concerns about the affordability too. I was fortunate enough to make housing decisions very early on with a cheap little condo when I was in college, and I was able to kind of leapfrog throughout my life. As my occupation changed and my income changed, I was able to take that little bit to go into the next thing and the next thing, and I'm concerned that that's not an opportunity that's afforded to anyone who wants it. I have a 22-year-old stepson, and I have kids that hopefully soon will be out of my house. That was on tape. And I'll make a place for him in my basement if I have to. But when I think about the cost of the houses that we have available now, we attract people who come in, and I love that too. I've met lots of friends who have come here from Texas or Berkeley or all these places, and so I don't necessarily want us to deter people from coming, but we're swapping out individuals who can afford to come and live here because maybe they live somewhere else that was even less affordable, and we don't have those places for our children to go. So we're kind of bringing in new growth with people buying the houses, but we don't have the places for our children to grow up and buy a house and stay here. So it's almost like there's this trade-off that's happening, and I think affordable housing, is a trade-off too. When we think about, what changes can we make? I think we need to we need to be honest about what our competing priorities are. Because I think when you have competing priorities, there's trade-offs to that. And as someone who listens to the county council, and I've been listening and sometimes participating for over 2 years now. And I think the one thing that we don't talk out loud a lot, at least in public opinion, is what are our goals as a community and what are the trade-offs if this is what we decide? You know, we want beautiful green spaces and parks and trails so we can recreate, but we also want density in our urban areas so that we have, you know, enough housing available. You know, all these things have a trade-off. Do we expand the UGA? Do we maintain it how it is? I think we need to bring all these options out on the table and have robust discussions about what that means if we choose A and what that means if we choose B. And from there, create a plan that we can actually implement. And that's the thing, and I'm speaking as a private citizen when I'm looking at it going, wow, there's so much going on and there's so many things that we want to do, but we're trying to do everything all at once. And I think sometimes we make decisions that have unintentional consequences on something else, and then we go 2 steps back. And I know that's kind of anecdotal, but it's my observation, but I also think that that's the gap that I can fill on the county council is let's have a conversation about all of our priorities and which one is the priority and move forward, and knowing that there's going to be trade-offs that we're going to have to be open and honest and engaging the community about.
Okay. I know Ron and Ralph have some questions, but before I turn things over to them, you've spoken a lot in our discussion so far about the need to listen to communities. And on your website, you talk about you say you want to serve our communities and not party politics. Mm-hmm. How has party politics manifested itself over the past years in Whatcom County that has created a problem? And how has that not served our communities?
So I'll take from what I've observed, mm-hmm. rather than going back into a history that I may not know all the pieces to. Mm-hmm. Well, when I'm listening to votes that are being taken, and there's dialogue, there's discussion going on, and I think some of it's really valid, and I think some of it takes into consideration voices that may not always be heard. And I'm talking specifically more about our rural communities. So I think on our current council we get a lot of 4-3 votes, and we got a lot of 6-1 votes. But we really do get a lot of 7 votes, and those are the ones that to your question, those are the ones that are serving the community when we have our county councils agreeing on something and pushing it forward. The 4-3 votes sometimes, I think, leave room for discussion. And what I mean by that is you'll hear the dialogue, but it doesn't make a difference in the outcome. It either doesn't result in a friendly amendment that could perhaps carve out a piece that in an urban area this would really work great, but we're not thinking about how this would impact our rural community. And I think there's places for that without throwing the whole thing out and dismissing what the 4 individuals bring forward. And I see that happen. And as a citizen who has, I lived in Bellingham for 20-something years, so I love Bellingham. So it's not a county versus city. But when I've been out in the community since the floods, and there's some voices out there that I think didn't get heard oftentimes when we're making decisions at a county level, and I think that does a disservice. And if I could expand on one thing, and this will wrap it up, and hopefully it'll make sense. My background is in business, and so leadership, development, coaching, collaboration, those are all things that I spent almost two decades doing. So I think of things sometimes in a little bit of more of a business perspective, is that when you have a county council that clearly gets divided on some issues and it results in the 4-3, if you're that person in that 4 that brought together that resolution or that ordinance, and you know that you're going to get the votes, that doesn't open up for good, robust conversation that could have made that resolution or that proposal even better. Because you know you're going to get the votes. So you're not, if I looked at it from a business perspective, if I was bringing forward a proposal, but I knew that Ralph probably wasn't going to agree with me on this, and I needed his support to make it happen, I would be anticipating, what's Ralph going to need? What can I put in here that's going to serve the people that he's representing? And I think that's important. And when we get party politics, we lose sight of that.
Do you see yourself as a swing vote then in a future council?
I mean, I don't.
3-3 plus 1?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure how people define swing vote, but I will tell you, there's been times when I've listened to the council votes and it's been 7-0, and I went, oh, would I have been that one that didn't vote for that, and why? And then there's times when it's been 4-3, and I'm like, I completely agree, and then, but there has been times when it's been 4-3, and I've been, oh, you missed the vote on something. You missed a voice that would have been easily remedied if you would have presented it this way or added this in there, because I could already hear, the coffee shop talking about this, on Wednesday morning about how this is going to affect them. And that's, yeah.
Okay.
So potentially, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ron?
Yeah.
Ralph?
I'm going to defer to Ralph, our local government person, first, to get his questions in.
Yeah, I got one or two.
Okay.
I was going to ask you if you were going to switch things from 4-3 to 3-4, but Dean beat me to it. He asked it, he worded the question much better than I would have. So that's fine. Now, what I heard you say was a lot of not necessarily bringing specific concrete ideas, but more being willing to hear what the community wants and assessing and then maybe making the best decision. But I'm going to propose a concrete idea about affordable housing and see what you think, which would be one solution to affordable housing potentially might be that we create a high-density rural area in the model of Kendall or Birch Bay or something like that, not necessarily an incorporated city, but a place where we can build more houses than we can now. Just think of it as a new Kendall somewhere else in the county. Mm-hmm. Now, is that something just on its face, just that concept, is that something you would support in order to, get more housing in the rural areas? It might be at the expense of farmland, potentially, so there's pros and cons there, potentially.
Well, on the farmland piece, we're supposed to support 100,000 acres, and I don't believe we're at that. So I think that would be a challenging rub for the rural community to lose more farmland to denser areas. I think when I look, the first thing, this brings more questions, I think, just even proposing that is, we get areas like Kendall. Well, do they have the infrastructure to support that? Do they, if we create more housing out there, then another question I think Bellingham communities would have is we want to electrify. We want to, we're looking at different energy sources. What happens if we get a big chunk of people that are way far away from some of these, these services, and we know they're going to be driving to and from to work. So, I would chew on it, something like that. I wouldn't immediately dismiss it, but I think there could be nuggets in there that, that could potentially work.
Yeah, and there might be some pushback on the idea of maybe digging 1,000 new wells into the, into the groundwater too, and all that entails.
So maybe not skyrise, but maybe there's a few places to put some houses or some ADUs that make sense.
Sure. I had one other question, actually, at least one lined up. And this is kind of on a new thread. It's funny because one thing I'd like to ask, I guess, in all my years of being a political reporter of a candidate is, well, have you ever attended a county council meeting or have you ever attended a city council meeting? You'd be surprised at how many new candidates really have never done that. Now, I know better in your case. I know you've attended them religiously. And I've also learned, I was looking at public records requests with the county government specifically, and you have made a lot of those in the past couple of years. It seems like there's maybe a few trends around elections and around the health department and maybe the medical examiner's office in a couple cases. There's a couple dozen of these. And my question to you about public records requests and that level of involvement and engagement, which is a very high level of engagement in county government, is what did you hope to learn from your public records requests? And then what did you learn? What conclusions did you reach? And then thirdly, most importantly, what information did you gain that you would kind of bring onto the council to maybe affect some sort of change? Like, you must have learned this, that, and the other thing. So what information are you armed with now, should you be elected, that you might, bring proposals forward?
I don't know if anything that those go way back, and I would say that many of them were never even received. So they are really understaffed there, so that might be something to look at.
Right.
I don't know if there's anything that I found in there that would arm me with anything. So there's no
Smoking
there's no
gun or whatever, whatever the expression is.
And there's not, and it's interesting, and this is, this has less to do with, my candidacy. Well, this has nothing to do with my candidacy, but more about my personality. So you don't live in this area as long as I have been raised in the county and lived in the city and have friends and family all across political spectrums, all across religious spectrums. People are very different, and I love and respect them all. But when you have two diverging opinions from people that you respect, whether it's in their field or just because that's their lived experience, sometimes you just got to go look for facts. Probably similar to journalism. People talk to you all the time, and they're very credible and they're sincere and well-intended, and then you can talk to somebody about that same exact thing and they have a different perspective for you. So sometimes you just gotta try to go where facts will lead you. I didn't find that public record requests were all that beneficial. Some of them were just to either ease my mind on something that I may have been concerned about at the time, or validate something that I thought, okay, that is true,
I'd like to follow up, just especially since several of your requests were to the elections office, and ever since 2020, there's been some concern in some camps about the integrity of elections or the security of elections. I'm wondering if you found anything to help you learn one way or the other how secure and how legitimate or how much integrity there is around Whatcom County elections.
Oh, absolutely. Now I know exactly where you're going with this one.
Yeah.
So there was a period of time people are talking about their concerns about elections all the time. And so what I did is I watched the videos, I went to observer training, I spoke with, is it Amy? Amy, I think, is at the elections office.
Not sure, there's a few of them.
Yeah. I was an observer, and I asked a bunch of questions, and I felt comfortable, and that's what I shared with people who had, had questions to me about that very topic. And I guess I don't know what else to say about that, but I think the setup is amazing. So
it looks like they're doing it, running a tight ship, and counting the votes that are coming in, and everything looks legit from your perspective.
I watched every part of it, all the way from them bringing the ballots in and signing everything in, and when I observed, I didn't see that there was any cause for concern.
Oh, well, that's good to know.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, that's all I had for now, for the moment.
So I'll continue on the theme. You obviously have been involved in politics, at least as an active observer, and you feel that elections particularly are important. Have you voted in all or most local elections here? And if so, is there one that stands out as one that was important to you for some reason?
Well, I have voted on every election for local items, I believe, since 2016. I had spoke with a group of young adults about voting recently, meaning in the last 3-4 months, and what I'd shared with them, that probably one of my most regrettable things now I know in my wisdom is that I wasn't more involved in politics from a younger age, and that I am one of those individuals that didn't start paying attention to things until it started. You felt like, wow, this might affect me, or it might affect my kids. And the last couple of years, afforded me the opportunity. I will say, if anything good came out of the pandemic, it was the ability to watch things on Zoom, to just get more involved and pay attention. I wish I would have done it sooner. But I wouldn't say that anything particularly stood out. I think I cast some votes perhaps that if I would have dug a little bit deeper may have been a little bit different. But sometimes the voter's pamphlet doesn't give you all that you need to know. And so even when in the last election, I made a concerted effort to speak to every candidate at least once before I voted. So I had an opportunity to talk with Joe Timmons. I've spoken with Alicia Rule a few times. Sharon Shoemake, all of the more conservative candidates as well, and the value of that for me was it was priceless, because I think there's one thing to. Articles are great, so I'm not bashing our reporters. Articles are great, and I think when we have journalism where we're fairly, representing people, I think those are great mediums to educate. But there's nothing like going and listening to people speak, because you get a sense of who they are. I think the one thing about politics, and maybe that's why they call it politics or call people politicians, is sometimes you can say a bunch of things and it sounds really great, and it's not what you do or not what you stand for, and you can tell something different about someone when you have a conversation with them.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, what did you learn from those people and talking to them in person that made you want to seek public office, or did you have second thoughts about it? Or
So you would be surprised, because I don't know if people believe me when I say this, is that I wasn't intending to seek public office during those conversations. I was just intending to be an informed voter. That is the one thing, especially in the last couple of years, that has been on my priority list personally, is to be an informed voter, because I think I realized how important voting is. One of the things that I've heard, and to your point when we're talking about elections, I didn't start just talking to the community since I filed for this position. I've lived here my whole life, and I talk to people all the time, whether it's at county council or if I'm giving public comment on things. I haven't been horribly affected by things like other people have in the past few years. I've been very, very fortunate, and that's not lost on me. But when I hear people in the community that are either afraid to come forward with their voice or speak out about like the floods because they don't feel they're going to get listened to, or they're embarrassed to talk in public, or whatever the reason may be, I found myself in times taking those comments forward on their behalf. But that wasn't because I was thinking in the future I would seek public office. It was more because I've always tried to be an advocate for voices that haven't been heard. And I don't mind putting myself out there. I don't mind taking a few arrows. If somebody has something important to say and they're afraid to say it, I'm okay to say it on their behalf. And so that's part of the reason for those things as well. I file public report things not for my own interest, just for helping maybe soothe someone who had concerns about certain things as well. I didn't decide to run for this office until pretty quickly before I did it.
So what prompted you to run?
I was actually hoping that question would come up because this is, and if I could I want to. Can I share a story about it rather than?
Of course.
So, and my friend Mike. Well, I don't know if that's really what his name was, but my friend Mike helped me realize this. I got yesterday for the first time. I got my first candidate call on my campaign line with someone who was not very friendly. He clearly was not contacting me because he wanted to get my stance on something or have a conversation. He started right in on, I read your website and who are you and how do you label yourself and what do you describe yourself as and what's your platform and what are you going to do and at one point I tried to answer some of his questions but usually got he cut me off about 3-4 words in. And he made a lot of assumptions, and I finally just said, Mike, do you have a question for me? And he goes, with as long as you've been watching county council, you should have PDFs on your website talking about all the things that you're going to change when you get there. And I said, what I found is when I go and look at previous candidates' websites, I see lots of lists of things that they promised to do that sounded really great. And not a lot of them got done. And that's not to say that there was poor intentions. I think sometimes we think we can make a lot of changes, so we say all the things we're going to do, and then we realize that that's not within our purview of county council, or there was more to it than you thought. Which is why I'm a little more hesitant on saying this is what I would do, because I know there's always more to it than what I know right now. And so I think I purposely, and if you have critics on my, or if you have criticisms on my website, I did it myself. So, but I purposely didn't list a bunch of things that I am gonna do. And so, what Mike's question back to me is, well, don't you think it's better to list a bunch of things that you're gonna do and not do it than not list anything and not do it? And my response to him was, I don't think you're correct, because if there was one thing, if I was only able to accomplish one thing being on county council, and if that was to bring groups of people together to have conversations about what our priorities should be, which ones are competing, and what the trade-offs are, and do it in public opinion with full transparency, so that we gave people the respect that they deserve, but knowing all of the story, so that they could see what was happening and why decisions were made, and that was the one thing that I could change or affect, then I can say I can make a promise and I can actually follow through with it. And that was my answer to Mike. And then he laughed and he says, well, maybe you should put that on your website because it might get you some votes. And so I said, well, if you know somebody who needs a part-time job to help me with my website, give them my name, And so I think, for me, it's really hard for people to believe that I'm doing this purely for the reason why I believe this position was intended. It was intended to be a public service to the people of this community. And it doesn't mean that special interests don't have a voice at the table, that shouldn't be able to provide their perspective. But still, this should not be a position for political aspiration, or I'm not going to run for governor, I promise you that. So I'm making a promise I can keep. It really should be getting people in these roles that truly care about the community, like truly care, know who they're accountable to, know the faces that they see. And when I go places, I see people. If I do something horribly wrong on county council, I have a whole group of people that I'm accountable to. I've worked with hundreds of people in Whatcom County. I have family members and friends in every industry all over the place. My dad's a Democrat and my grandparents were Republican. I have to answer to a whole bunch of people, and that's not lost on me. I do not think this is an easy job. I have the utmost respect for the people in county council right now, even when I don't always agree. But I think each one of them brings something to the table that's representative of their constituents, and I think that's important. I would expect some of them to be way more in the weeds on certain topics because they're representing a group of people that have interests that are important. And I don't think we leverage each other enough in the county council and bring the best out of one another. And that's, I guess if you were gonna ask me a question, what I think is missing in the part that I think I could fill, I've been studying these individuals, for over 2 years, and there's things that I can point out about each one of them that I think are valuable to the council. And so, sorry, that was my soapbox.
Do you think in our current political climate that people who would be your constituents really want to get together and sit down and shake hands and agree on things? Do you feel like that, and why can't they do that now?
You mean in our current county council?
No, I mean just in our current political environment. If you come to the council, what will be different about the council in terms of people suddenly wanting, honestly, I'm kind of a skeptic because I've been in this business for a long time.
Yep.
But everybody seems to want to bring people together, and when they get together, they're yelling at each other, they're shouting at each other, they're calling each other names, they're calling the police. It happened last night. That's the environment that we live in. So what is it about your candidacy that's going to help ease that and get them to want to work together, I guess?
Well, I did go through the professional certification for the mediation at the
That should help.
The Whatcom Dispute Center, 2018.
That's a good quality.
And so
for a candidate.
I actually Seth Fleetwood was in my class when I took that. And,
wow.
There may have been some individuals there that thought, wow, you'd be a really good mediator.
Oh, I thought you meant he was causing a problem that you were trying to solve.
and I was mediating.
Right.
No, okay. See, that's on video.
Okay.
But that was a great course as well. I think
Yeah.
I have an affinity for that.
Okay.
I'm not a polarizing individual, and part of that could be my background in leadership. When you lead people that have all sorts of experiences, all sorts of different beliefs, you kind of learn how to be respectful. You learn how to listen. You find the pieces that need to come out in order to make good outcomes. I think I have that type of personality. I know you're not asking me about my personality as a candidate.
Well, that's part of it, right? It's like you're having empathy for somebody that you maybe don't agree with.
It's also lived experience too. I have had enough of my. I've had some pretty good knocks, and I keep standing up, and I show up, and now I'm running for a political office.
Right.
And so. Though I wouldn't wish some of those experiences on other people, I think sometimes you're exposed to certain things so that you can be a more empathetic ear. I'm relatable. I want to relate to people. I think the saddest thing that I hear in our community, and and it may be the rural community because there's not a city force in there that's bringing people together. That unincorporated area that is just, it's not even a trust. It's just like a lack of faith that their voice matters. We still have more than 200 people out in the county that aren't in homes yet since the flood. And those are good people out there. I wish there was more that we could have done, and we could have done it faster. But when I lived in Bellingham too, so I was on the other side. I've seen both sides of the coin and listened to both perspectives that they each have, at each other. But man, if some of the folks that lived in Bellingham could have seen what I saw on November 16th, and just the pure heroism of people in Sumas and Everson helping each other out, I think that even just lenses like that, there would be a whole found of respect, Yeah.
Okay.
You were mentioning the floods. We've also recently had wildfires east of Lake Whatcom, widespread, unprecedented heat around the country, thankfully not here this summer.
Yeah.
sea levels are rising. We're a coastal county. We're also subject to dangers of smoke and wildfires, as we found. What can local government do to mitigate or at least prepare and adjust for the effects of climate change here?
So recently, Sudden Valley had a big hurrah, their 50-year anniversary, and I was talking, and his name is escaping me now, so I'm sorry. He runs the CERT committee, like the certification for emergency preparedness. I think programs like that are great for the people, because I think when we're in situations like that, it's like forgetting to read the manual on a plane for your emergency exits, which I always do, and I make my kids do that. But to have that sense of confidence, to be prepared for something, even if it doesn't happen, I think that's important. I think engaging the community too in what they can do. I feel like we talk on high levels what we want to do as as a state or even as a county, but what can individual people do? And engage in that conversation. Again, I think I kind of go back and I realize that maybe not everybody wants to engage in that conversation, but maybe we haven't approached them in the right ways either. Mm-hmm. So I think we can still explore that.
Right, especially with the lack of action on a national level because of the polarization that we've all talked about. Much of the work on dealing with climate change is happening at the state, local, mm-hmm. and individual levels. Mm-hmm. We talked about a lot of really heavy issues here, but I want to get something that's not quite so heavy. Okay. We all have influences in our lives, people or events that have made us who we are. Do you have particular heroes or heroines in your life, people who have had profound effects on you and made you the person you are today?
I love this question, and I've answered it the same since I was a kid. Sorry. I'm a bit of a skeptic when it comes to heroes in the sense of people in the limelight or people we elevate because they're smarter or prettier or more talented or have more money or whatever the reasons, athletic ability, all these things. I've never been, I've been impressed and respect the talent of what they do, but I don't know those people, so for them to have a profound effect on me, I couldn't put them in that category, but the person who has is my grandmother. She adopted all 4 of her children, and I got to be a benefit of being adopted by one of her sons. She was just she was a woman of hope. I still run into people in the Linden and in Sumas area that remember my grandparents and particularly my grandmother, and our holidays often were spent not just with the immediate family, but other families that she had adopted into her home, who were just part of the fabric of every holiday. And she, I would always question, I ask a lot of questions, I've always been a questioning person, how do you know that you're a good person? And I think I probably asked her those questions when I was going through challenges in my life, and she would say, if just one person believes in you enough that you're a good person, then you are always capable of being a good person. And she was just, if the world could have more people like her, we wouldn't be in half the situations that we're in now. So that, always my answer.
Well, finally, we've asked you a lot of questions today. Is there anything we haven't asked you that you'd like to make known? Anything that you'd like to say to convince the editorial board to endorse you and to convince people who are watching this video to vote for you that we haven't dealt with.
Well, I appreciate the flexibility that you've already given me to share my Mike story. I'm actually going to do a blog post called Thank You, Mike. I actually would just like to end, if I may, just thanking. I started out with this, and you can call it a tagline, always willing to have the conversation. And I use that because I've been saying that even before this. So, whether I'm discussing a topic on, social media and it's controversial and I'll present something and I'll always put always willing to have the conversation. And so I appreciate this opportunity because you've asked me questions. Some of them I feel came naturally. Some of them I had to put my thinking cap on for, but you gave me the opportunity to sort of ad-lib, and I appreciate that because I know that you didn't have to do that. But thank you for being engaging in this process, because I think being willing to have the conversation is always the first step to good things. If I was to speak to the outer world, I've been incredibly humbled by the number of people that have supported me in this campaign. Ideally, I would have liked everybody to, that would be my hope, to try to appeal to that larger group of individuals that want to see our local politics focus on good governance and serving the people. And if I could end with this, if you don't mind, this is probably the best way to end it, other than a great appreciation for everyone. But I wanted to share this. This was given to me by a gentleman a couple days ago, wanted to sit and have a conversation with me. And we sat for 2 hours, and he's been in politics in his past life for many years and involved in the community. And he wanted to give me this, and it's the preamble to the charter. So I wanted to read it. Treasuring the many wonders of our unique environment and realizing that the power and duty to govern and protect this region is inherent in its people, we, the citizens of Whatcom County, in order to have a government which advances justice, inspires confidence, and fosters responsibility, do adopt as the foundation of our government this charter, amended by referendum 1995. This was important for him. There were some additions that were made, and it was important for them to be there, but also to whomever has this position understand that this is the preamble to the charter. It helped me in my resolve that I'm in the right place, doing the right thing, and I believe for what our community needs right now that I am the best candidate to do that. So thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Democracy depends on journalists covering local government, local elections. But the other part of that, of course, is people who are willing to run and be candidates. And I know many sacrifices have to be made to do that. So thanks for being a candidate, too.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Thanks.